Welcome to DinsTalk, the space where soul wisdom meets bold action. I'm Mia Dins, your host, here to ignite your fire, help you claim your power, and guide you to take unstoppable steps towards your dream. Every episode is designed to awaken your purpose, fuel your passion, and spark transformation in your life. It's time to step into your truth and never stop. Let's dive in. Welcome back to DinsTalk, beautiful soul. Thank you for tuning in again. And we are in season 2, 2026. And I have my very first guest actually for 2026 is Liz Gorga from Brisbane in Australia. And I'm so grateful that she is here today. And I can't wait for this beautiful conversation. I listened to an episode on a podcast where she was talking about her work, and I was so intrigued and I got activated. That was a couple of months back when I was in Bali last year. And then I thought I need to connect with her. And today we made it happen. Such a beautiful start to 2026. And I can't wait for you guys to hear her wisdom, to get activated and to see where this conversation will take us. Liz is a woman who walks her talk. And when it comes to embodiment, Liz is a sexologist, a therapeutic Yoni massage practitioner, and a writer based in Australia. Liz is deeply devoted to guiding women and vulva havers home to their erotic truth through embodied bodywork, sensual somatics, and creative devotion. And I absolutely love that. And her work weaves together somatic healing, sultry storytelling. I'm really excited to talk about that. Fantasy, desire, and the deep intelligence of the body. She doesn't approach sexuality as something to fix or perform, but as life force energy, creative energy, and the living story held in our cells, our wounds, and our nervous system. Her work is rooted in the body, shaped by years of hands-on practice, artistic exploration, and a deep trust in erotic expression as a portal to a fully turned on, alive, and truthful life. This conversation is an invitation to meet your desires and feel them pull through you like life force energy. So if you're ready to soften, open, and maybe meet parts of yourself you have never fully allowed before, let's dive in. So Liz, I know you have done it's just a snippet of everything you have done. There's always so much more, but welcome and thank you for joining us today and taking your time. So if you want to say something to the audience, a little bit about yourself, if you want, and how you got started with your work, then this is your stage.
Thank you so much. Thank you, first of all, for having me on the podcast. Like you said, it's such a nice way to start 2026 is by really diving straight in, making connections. And I mean, I love talking about my work. So I'm so honored that you invited me onto your podcast to have this conversation. And I also need to say thank you for that beautiful introduction. I feel like I could not have introduced myself better. So I appreciate that. And I think you really beautifully wove together a lot of the different elements of what I do. So yeah, I would love to sort of introduce myself, and I can tell you a little bit about my journey and how I got to this place where I am working in the sexuality industry and weaving together all of these different elements. I feel like I've come to a place, mostly in the last year or so, where my work has become really, really potent, and I'm really excited about where it's headed. So I suppose, before we hopped on to the call, we're sort of talking about where we're from. We're both people who are living overseas. I originally, even though I'm located in Brisbane at the moment, I did grow up in the US, and I grew up, I suppose, in a very sort of conservative and religious household. So my journey into working in the sexuality industry probably started from a really young age, because despite this sort of narrow-minded view around sex and not super open conversations around sex, I was someone who was really sexually curious and really explorative when I was a young person. And I would say, especially growing up, I was the kind of person that has a bit of this good girl exterior going on, but a little bit of this rebellious streak beneath the surface. So I think part of the reason that I was really sexually curious and explorative when I was a young person was partially due to the fact that I was told that sex was off limits. And it was, this inner rebel in me that wanted to touch the things that I wasn't supposed to. So when I was, in my teenage years and early 20s, I was a little bit sex obsessed, to be honest. I was someone who was really, explorative, especially within the community that I grew up in, who most of my friends were very conservative and religious as well. I found that I was someone who was exploring sex a lot younger than other people. I was a little bit more free in my expression, a lot more open and having conversations about it. I was always the person who was having conversations about sex. I was always the person in my friend groups who people were coming to talk about sex. And yet, looking back on that period of time now, I definitely see that a lot of my expression and sexuality and exploration did come from a bit of a disembodied place because I wasn't given the opportunity to have open conversations around my body. So I was, I think a lot of people can relate to this growing up, especially in school. And if you did come from a conservative upbringing, there's not a lot of open conversation around sex and how your body actually works, around your menstrual cycle if you're a woman, and just generally how to listen to your body and let it speak to you. And when I was in my mid-20s, I completely shut down sexually. I had a few things that probably contributed to that. I had a couple of different STI diagnoses when I was in my mid-20s that kind of added one layer of disconnect. And then I had a very painful invasive surgery to scrape HPV off of my cervix, precancerous cells off of my cervix that took a really long time for my body to heal from. And I started to experience a lot of numbness in my body, a lot of pain with penetration that added another layer of disconnect. And I was having, painful periods. I was in a long-term relationship at the time when my desire was starting to sort of dip and change, which I had never experienced before in a relationship. And all of these things sort of compiling made me feel really disconnected, not just from sex, but from myself. Because I feel like for me personally, sex has always been a huge part of my identity. But I really, truly believe that sex is a huge part of all of our identities. And I think anyone who's had a period of disconnect, whether it's something that, you move through the early years of your life feeling disconnected because you can relate to some of the experiences that I've had, or whether it has happened to you later in life when you sort of hit a point where your body starts to change, or you've had children, or, your relationship dynamic changes and you start to feel that dip in your turn on and your pleasure and your sexuality. I find that it ripples into other areas of life. So for me personally, what I found is that when I was disconnected from sex, it also meant that I was disconnected from my relationship, from my friendships, from my work, from the things that I was creative and passionate about. And it really sent me on my own personal journey to re-explore and rediscover who I was as a sexual erotic being. And I think that when I sort of began my journey, it really did start with re-educating myself. I think there was a lot that I wasn't taught about my body and how it worked, both cyclically and sexually. And at the same time, when I started to gather all of this information, it really lit a fire in me to share this with more women. And that's what got me started working in the sexuality industry. Is I wanted to make sure that no woman needed to feel the way that I felt, that level of disconnect. It sort of sparked me in the direction of seeking out, more studies. At the beginning of my career in the sexuality industry, I started as a coach, and I also studied sexological bodywork. So I'm a therapeutic Yoni massage practitioner as well, which has become such a core of what I do. The education, I love learning new things. If someone would pay me to study for the whole rest of my life, I'd be like, fuck yeah, I'll do it. I love learning. Yeah. I love learning. I love teaching as well. But what I find is the knowledge that we can store up in our minds is just one layer. And it really takes not just educating ourselves, but also integrating it into our lived, felt experience in the body. And body work, therapeutic Yoni massage, has become such a huge part of my work, because it's taking all of that knowledge and then it's giving people an experience where they get to show up in a very devotional, intentional, safe space to explore touch, consensual touch, slowed down touch to their breast, to their womb, to their vulva, to their vagina, and to really start to tune into their body awareness and the sensations that are there, the subtleties and nuances of those sensations, and expand their capacity to not just experience pleasure, but also to listen to their bodies. And more recently, over the last, year or so, I've started to really weave into my work more of this creative outlet as well. Before I started working in the sexuality industry, I was a writer. I wrote professionally for about 15 years, and it was something that I was really missing after starting my own business. And I started writing a whole lot more, and I realized, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but I realized that there is such a tie between our sexual expression and our creative expression. And when we're able to weave those two together, it's really powerful because it amplifies both. So a lot of my work has started to weave those two together, and bring the sexual exploration down to like a level in the body where we can start to really pay attention to how our body speaks to us, if that makes sense.
I love that. I mean, thank you so much for sharing all of this. It was so beautiful. I was really in it, in the story, and I love that. And there are so many nuggets to it. And first, I wanted to say I can relate a lot to your story. And I'm sure that listeners out there too, probably all in different manifestations in different ways, but the feeling is probably the same, like the shaming, not touching. Like you, I was very explorative when I was very young. I was even teaching other children in the village, like how to, find pleasure. And I didn't know that it was masturbating. I was just exploring, right? And then I got told off with my family, like, no, you're not supposed to do that. And it's really shut down. So I can relate to that. And I'm happy that you embark on this journey and then you do the work you do. And then of course, all the disconnection with the body. And also I can relate. I had the same experience, except not the operation with the pre-cancer cells, because I was already way too much into the healing and the quantum and things at that time. I just got guided to say no to the operation. It was like that came through to me. I was sitting in front of the doctor and she was urging me to do that, right? I was even shocked that I had this diagnosis, right? But something in my whole being told me, that was actually just after COVID, right? And there's still a lot of fear mongering and things like that. And I was like, nope. I said, I'm coming back in 6 months' time and this will be gone. And then I was like, when I was walking out of this hospital, I was like, what did I just say? Who are you? I was not trying to play God, but something was so strong. And I thought to myself, I know this is the truth, what is showing there, but I also know there's something else. My body can feel it happen. And, it happened. So, but I also know that sometimes we may need this operation, possibly depending on where you are at that time. So I can relate to that, but also the disconnection. And I feel like a lot of people probably don't realize that when things in their life, like they lose their joy, their life force energy, the kids are like fully stressful, or they just don't have appetite, and not just appetite for food, but for anything in life that has to do with the life force energy, with the sexual energy, right? So I love that, what you just shared, and how you can then find your way back to actually connect with your body and the womb space. Such a sacred temple we have there, and such a powerhouse. And I must say, I was underestimating it for so many years. And I know you spoke in Rachel's podcast about the cycle, how important that is to actually live according to our cycle. And that was the very moment when I listened to that podcast, when I was in a dip, because my cycle was trying to come through, and I was in the gym when I was listening to you guys, and I was trying to push again, a little softer, but still I could feel I'm pushing, I'm not honoring what my body truly needs. What is the most common thing, like when they first start to connect with their womb space or Yoni? I mean, I would love to have a Yoni massage one day. That's on my list because I haven't experienced yet. And what is their first experience, or what is the most common thing, why they are actually blocked? And yeah.
It's a good question. I don't know if there's one particular thing. And I suppose there's two parts to this question as well, right? Because we're talking a little bit about the cyclical element and your physical womb and how you move through the world. And then also, I suppose a lot of my work is really revolving around sexuality. And so I do tie the two together. So my background is in sexuality coaching as well as in menstrual cycle coaching. And I think it's really important. Obviously, living cyclically is so important. I think, honestly, thinking back to my own journey to what got me here and what got me working in this career as well was buying a book called Woman Code. Have you heard of it?
I think I've heard of it, but I've not read it. I think someone else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's by Alyssa VT.
Yeah.
And it's all about the menstrual cycle and your hormones and about living cyclically. And I had originally bought the book when I was on sort of my sexual journey, trying to figure out why I was having these dips in libido, why I was disconnected to my pleasure, thinking maybe there's a hormonal imbalance. But that was really the first thing. I'm so glad that my mind went there, because that was the first thing that sort of got me started on this path myself, was learning about my cycle, because our cycle impacts everything. It impacts how we feel. It impacts, I think a lot of women move through the world a lot of women, not all women, very disconnected from their wombs and from their cycle. And it's not their fault. It's just, going back to this sort of lack of education, we're not taught a lot of the time how to actually tune into our hormonal cycle. And a lot of women move through the world in the way that society says, which is operating more on a 24-hour clock, which is more suited for a male body. Whereas with our hormones in a female body, they're constantly changing every single day from the first day we bleed until the day before we bleed the next time. And when we are pushing through, when we are not listening to what our womb actually needs, it causes a lot of disconnect. And that can manifest as physical symptoms like, I have lots of clients who come to me with, severe PMS or PMDD, with painful periods, with endometriosis, PCOS, fertility issues, and those all stem from hormonal imbalances. But also, more specific to the work that I do in the sexuality realm, is that a lot of women are actually disconnected from sex and pleasure because they're disconnected from their menstrual cycle as well. Because as our hormones are fluctuating, it changes our experience of sensation, receiving sensation. It changes our experience of actually feeling pleasure in our bodies. Yonis, are going to be more lubricated during certain times of our cycle. Our cervix is going to be at a different point, which means certain sex positions are going to feel different. Some are going to feel really good. Some are going to feel really different, or some are going to feel really uncomfortable. Our breast tenderness changes. Our sensitivity and tolerance for pain changes. And so a lot of the time when we're trying to have sex the same way, or when we discover something that feels good and then it doesn't feel good another time, we blame ourselves and we say that, there's something wrong with us and there's something that needs to be fixed, even though we're not recognizing that it is a cyclical process. Sex is a cyclical process, and our experience of sex is going to be different. So that's a huge thing that I find is like a big aha moment for my clients, especially when it comes to yoni massage and body work, is most of the people who come to me are coming for multiple sessions. So I encourage people, when they're booking multiple sessions, to come during different cycle phases. So they might come right after they've bled, they might come during ovulation, and they might come again during their premenstrual phase. And their experience, the sensations that they'll experience in their body are going to be completely different phase to phase because of all of these different things that are going on within them. And it's really beautiful to witness. One of the biggest things that I see happen for people who are on this journey of connecting in with the womb, with the menstrual cycle, living cyclically, and gaining that body awareness and that, the awareness of how their pleasure is changing when they come in and experience it in a yoni massage session, being able to do it with, myself trained practitioner, it allows them to sort of start to put language to the things that they're experiencing. And I always place a huge stress on using their voice, starting to articulate and bring words to the experiences that they're having, to the sensations that they're having, to the things that they need. And a lot of people walk away feeling like their voice has really been activated and being able to use it in a lot of different areas of their life.
That's powerful. That will bring us right to the next topic, like the expression. But before, what you just shared is so powerful, because I heard it many times with the man cycles, has a 24-hour cycle, and we have a monthly cycle. And that relates beautifully to the archetypes of, Luna, the moon, the lunation phase, the monthly phase. The moon is supposed to be the mother, the feminine. And when we're talking about the archetypes, energy, and the sun, the male father figure, which is so beautiful. As we know, the sun has a daily cycle and the moon a monthly cycle. So for people, maybe that helps them. And when I used to start with moon cycles in general, I wasn't aware of I wasn't really tapped into my own cycle back then in my womb space. But I realized when I observed the moon cycles that a lot of things are changing within me. And I, would take note like a scientist, like literally for a long time, over a year, I would just do it all the time. And then I would observe other people. And that was really fun because, I'm like you, very curious, love to study, I love to question everything. And when you start questioning everything within you, mostly, they learn so much, and then sharing it with other people. And then you are able to give them space to express themselves, which is very, very powerful. And the second thing with what you also mentioned with the overriding the cycle, of course, we are conditioned to it. We actually have no clue about the cycle. Honestly, when I started to have my cycle, I was 11 years old. It was before a running competition. I remember that. So what happened? I don't even remember. I don't think anybody educated me, my mom. Or it was just like, you get your cycle and then you get bleeding and you use like tampons or like, the pads, whatever. Okay, cool. And then obviously I started to take the pill when I was 16 for like 8 years. That was my journey. And just because it was in Germany, it was like that. People would do that. And obviously because I had a forced regular period then. But yeah. So, and I never connected. And then of course, I've always been an athlete. And especially through that, I was overriding my body cues. There was no cycle. And when I was boxing in New Zealand actively for 7, almost 8 years, I was training like a man. And also I'm very stubborn and very overly disciplined. Problem, and they just say it's normal, it's a sacrifice you do. But I believe there's a better way, because when you actually like start working with your cycle, you have so much more strength, endurance. There are certain days when you need to focus on endurance training, more strength training, but the minds of, I'm sure there are some trainers out there, coaches who already work in that way. I'm 100% sure, but it's just not very well known, because you would be when you need a rest or you need a lighter training, they would tell you, oh, you're weak. You need to push, you need to go harder. Well, that's my experience with the boxing, very penetrating masculine energy. And when I stopped 2 years ago and went on my travel and everything and left everything behind, obviously my body was starting to talk to me, and it wasn't pretty, there was suppression coming through. And now we're coming to the point, circling back, when we suppress so much. And that was not just about that, but also our desires, our fears, or anything, then this will show up in the body. And that's why I love what you just shared before, when they actually start to pinpoint with words, put a word to the feeling. And that already shifts energetically a lot in the body. When you just name it, you're like, oh, I'm actually feeling pain, or I have this desire or this fear. Then this is the start of everything. That's like the crack, and then so much can happen. And I get goosebumps when I talk about that. And now this is a beautiful part of your work. And you said you really dove into that because you're also a writer. I love writing too. I haven't published much as such, like a book or anything, but I just love writing as an expressive tool. And you do the sultry. Is it sultry? Do you pronounce it that way?
Yeah. Sultry storytellers.
Sultry storytellers. Yeah. How do you work with that? And how more, especially since you are a passionate writer, the power of words, and when we ourselves first, it's the most important step, right?
100%. Yeah. I love everything that you shared about your journey as well, because I do find, it's such a common story, right? It's, we don't know a lot about our bodies, and then our periods come, and I didn't take hormonal birth control because when I first started to take the pill, I had severe depression. That was a side effect. So I had to go off of it. But I didn't go off of it because I was listening to my body. It was more just like, I actually feel suicidal right now and I can't do this. But I know so many people who take the pill and it's almost a bit of a Band-Aid solution to regulate your period, to minimize various cycle signs, to prevent pregnancy. And it kind of just works as like a bit of a Band-Aid until you go off of it. And similar to your experience, so many women experience going off of that birth control. And all of a sudden your body is like, it's almost like you've ripped the tape off of your mouth and your body is like screaming at you. And all of these things are starting to show up in, the way the things that you're feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically. And it can be a really rude awakening. I think, even though that wasn't my experience, I definitely did experience that voice turning on. We talk about listening to our womb, like our womb, our Yoni is this, you keep saying life force energy. And that's exactly what I call sex is life force energy. And it's rooted in your pussy. It's rooted in your womb because that is the center where we have our voice. It is like the source of our intuition, and any question that we could want answered can be actually rooted there. And it just takes slowing down enough to actually listen. So when you give your body space to listen, it starts to tell a story. Every single experience that we have had, and I know we're talking specifically about sex here, but our sexual experiences are, just any sort of personal experience that we've had in our lives, they imprint on us, and our bodies store those memories and they store those experiences. And when we actually start to listen and also give an outlet to those stories to come through, that's when our voice starts to activate. So coming back to your question of, weaving in the practice of writing. I mean, I love writing as well. I know I said I wrote professionally for a number of years. I also just love writing. I love creative writing. I love getting a nice journal prompt and just allowing my pen to free flow. And I do find that for me personally, words have always held a lot of power, not just because I am a writer and I feel that writing is like one of my primary forms of creative expression, but words have also been something that have been, I suppose, like a bit of an erotic portal as well. Like a lot of people talk about the love languages. Words have always been my love language. I love for someone to tell me how they feel about me. And when it comes to sex as well, I've always been turned on by words. And that might be in the form of like a dirty text message, or it might be in the form of reading an erotic novel. I've always loved words. And so I suppose where this idea of sultry storytellers came from is a couple of years ago, I started to actually get really bored with the industry that I was in. I was finding that even though I was so passionate about this work, I was finding that especially the coaching industry was becoming, and this is my own personal experience and my own personal opinion. There are lots of really great coaches out there, but I was finding that I was being exposed to a lot of people who were entering the coaching industry without any sort of qualifications, without any study, without anything other than they just like decided that they wanted to slap on that title. And a lot of, especially in the sex coaching world, a lot of people started blending into one another. And they started sort of regurgitating a lot of the same stuff that, even though I worked in the sexuality industry for a long time, I'm still a human being and I'm still constantly learning new things about what turns me on, what I desire, how my body works, because our bodies are constantly changing. And so the things that I use with my clients are things that I use myself. Okay. Because I still have periods where I start to feel disconnected. I still have periods when my libido dips. And what I was finding is everyone was talking about the same stuff, but it wasn't working for me anymore. And I was really still so passionate about working in the sexuality space, in the erotic space, in body work. But I was like, I need to find something that works for me because a lot of this stuff isn't working for me. And so I kind of stumbled upon the weaving the writing together with sexuality. I stumbled upon that accidentally because I just started doing things that I was passionate about. and I missed writing. I started writing. And naturally, because I'm, in the world of sex all of the time, I started writing about sex and I started writing my own erotic stories, like part of it was just because I had these memories that I wanted to get down on paper. Part of it was also inspiration from, the spicy books that I was reading, but I started writing my own erotica kind of accidentally. And what I found is that it started as this place where, I was feeling a bit disconnected from my own sexuality again. And all of a sudden, as I was dropping into a writing practice where I was writing about these sexual experiences, my body actually started to respond and I started to feel turned on again. And I think if you can probably relate to this because you are someone who loves writing. But for anyone who's new to writing, sort of the golden rule to write well is to show, don't tell. So don't just say what happened. Don't just say I had a one night stand, but actually paint the picture, the sensory experience. What did it look like? What did it feel like? What did it smell like, taste like, sounds like? And I found that as I was dropping into that form of writing and really dropping into the sensory experience is that not only was I writing about it, but I was actually reliving it in my mind, feeling those sensations in my body. So it started as this portal to deeper turn on, but then it slowly started to morph my own practice from writing about memories to then writing about fantasies, writing things that I hadn't experienced, writing potentially, because with free writing, putting your pen to paper, starting with a prompt and just letting it flow, it will take you on a journey. So sometimes it was writing about things that had never happened to me. Sometimes it was writing about things that had happened to me, but all of a sudden I've changed the ending. I've rewritten my own ending. I've given myself closure. And I found it to be such a cathartic practice. And I found it to also be so powerful in helping me understand and integrate all these different sides of my sexuality that I hadn't touched yet. Because all of a sudden I was allowing myself to be completely uncensored, when we write. And, you asked about the importance, I think it was, of speaking words to yourself or letting your own words touch yourself first before they are exposed to anyone else. Writing is such a powerful way to do that, because we can literally rip those pages out and burn them and they never have to, be exposed to anyone else but ourselves. And so when we have that layer of privacy with our writing, and we really trust that creative process of letting whatever wants to flow out to come out, it can actually surprise you some of the things. When it comes to writing about sex, I was so surprised by some of the things that I wanted to write about, that my body wanted me to write about, things that my body was craving or things that I, didn't want to settle for anymore, that really, really wanted to be expressed and giving an outlet for it to actually come through. And then, this program that I've created with Sultry Storyteller that kind of weaves all of it together, right? We, in a really beautiful community space, we just started for the first time last year, but I had women from all over the world, Germany, Canada, Australia. We would meet in an online space and we would read erotic literature together. And we would use that, even though it's fun to read smut, it's also, I think sometimes people sort of label it as being being fluff, right? But when we actually read it with the mindset of I'm using these erotic stories as a conversation starter to realize something even deeper about myself and my own sexuality and what I crave, we started to have those conversations and we started to let those conversations then spark ideas for us to tell our own stories. And we started writing our own stories. We started sharing them out loud in our community space so that we could really practice using our voice, and being witnessed in those experiences started to normalize it. And we also started to then drop deeper into that felt experience, that body awareness through somatics to integrate all of it. So I love it. I foresee it as a program that's going to be running for a long time, but it's been really, really powerful. And I created it because that practice of writing was so powerful for myself. I found that with everything else that wasn't working for me anymore, this was the one thing that was allowing me to dig deeper and to excavate more of who I was as an erotic being than I've ever been able to do.
It sounds amazing. I just can see that growing the whole container, and I'm who knows, maybe I will be joining one day. I would love that. And I love what you said with the reading of the, those novels, when they have this erotic writing. And of course, we are conditioned like then to think, oh, it will never going to happen. It's never going to happen. It's just all fluff or made up. And that may be so. But the most important question, it's not about that. It's about, what does it do to you? What is it? What is it showing you about yourself? Are you desiring that? And then being honest with yourself and being like, I mean, come on, almost every woman who's reading that, we probably desire some of these things. And it's not actually, and I think that's the part now, what I love, that's that's a nuance here, that it's not about the actual act of it, possibly. It's more like the feeling, right?
Exactly.
Feel. I think we can dive into that, because I love because you inspired me when I read that on your website. I was like, because of course I have my own writing style, and it's very, witty and sarcastic and, this kind of thing, which I love. But then I also realized there's something else, a sensuality to my being that wants to emerge itself. And when I read that about your sultry storytelling, I thought, yeah. And then I looked it up as well a little bit. What does it actually mean? And what are the techniques of, and then what you just said about the whole, like the scene, like, it's not like she walked in the room. That's one sentence, right? But we can and then when she walked in, there was this beautiful light, and he was standing there in his, full of whatever, how it works. And you go really into the detail, and then this allows the reader to just visualize it as well, like a movie. And that's the beauty of it. That's when a book is well written, when you actually can really imagine. Oh, that's my opinion anyways. And I started to practice that a little bit with myself. And that's a beautiful way. And like you said, you can use it for any practice. You have a journal prompt, or when you start letting it all flow through, you will bring up your biggest fears, maybe even, you can work in different ways with that. It doesn't have to just be your erotic desires, can be anything, I believe. So I'm just still practicing it and want to go deeper into that. And actually even use it for my business as well, like what's coming up, and like to allow things to come. I'm just playing around with things. So that's powerful. And now with ask you that question before, because everybody has certain fantasies, right? And most of us, we never speak it out loud because we feel either ashamed, or we think it's not going to, it can't be coming true. Or maybe we are in a relationship and it's not suiting our values anymore, or or it's not, what we actually want in a relationship. For example, here the question, right? I used to have this fantasy of a threesome when I was younger, and it wasn't like a big one, like, oh, I have to have it. But that was always constantly coming up when I was in my, my pleasure moments. But now now it's not matching my standards of a relationship that I would want to have in the future. But neither am I a person anymore who's just doing a random hookup because I take care of my sacred room space. Right now, I'm very aware of what a person brings in, energetically, and, all the things. So I do not do those things. It, takes a certain amount of time to allow someone in. But I do. Yeah. So I'm just, there was a question, like when you write it down, or when you have this fantasy, does it actually mean it has to be coming true, or is it just a matter of writing it down and then what was your opinion? What do you think, or like your experience?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's something that it's a question that I've been asked a lot by my clients. So I've been having a lot of conversations about fantasy recently. And I find, I don't know, I'm sure you can relate to this. A lot of the time, running your own business, especially in the wellness space, you do attract a lot of clients who potentially have things in common with you. And so for me personally, I'm married. I've been with my husband for like 13 years now. So I'm in a long-term relationship. It is a monogamous relationship. A lot of my clients are in monogamous relationships. A lot of my clients as well are in long-term relationships. And I find with fantasies, not just writing fantasies, but also the pure experience of having a fantasy, there can sometimes be this layer of guilt or shame involved in that when it doesn't match your reality. And what I always tell people is that fantasy is so important. Fantasy is important for everyone, because when we think about our erogenous zone, so the parts of our body that turn us on, it is not our pussy. It is not, our G-spot or even our skin. It's actually our brain. Our brain is our largest erogenous zone. And so we actually need to activate our brain and our imagination in order to expand our capacity for pleasure and turn on in our bodies and to allow ourselves to go to the depths of that turn on. So imagination, fantasy is imagination. It's a way for us to play in a safe environment, a safe controlled environment. And in our minds, in our imagination, we actually can access any sexual experience that we could ever dream up, right? Now, when we're thinking about, relationship dynamics, whether you're someone who's, been in a long-term relationship like myself, whether you're someone who leans towards monogamy or whatever it is, when those, as you sort of worded it as those values, like those relationship values, when they don't match what you're fantasizing about, I do know that a lot of people try to shut it off, but I encourage people to actually let them be, let yourself actually lean into them. And I think, because we're talking a little bit about storytelling and about writing is a really good way to do that, right? Because sometimes when we're only in our head and experiencing it in our head, we cut it short, or we might not come to completion where we're able to fully integrate it. But we are always, because yes, we're human beings, but we're also animals, and animals have, this instinct to, fuck and to be attracted to certain things. And we actually can't control those things that we are curious about, that we are attracted to, even if we are in a monogamous relationship, even if we want a monogamous relationship. And so this actually gives us an opportunity to experience those things that we're curious about without actually having to live it out in real life. We can 100%. Sometimes when you're exploring fantasies, it can give you insight into things that you do want to bring into your real life, but it never has to. And I think it's really powerful in being able to, experience your fantasy in your imagination or in your writing, and to tell the difference, to kind of come to that conclusion of, I got to experience this. I got to feel it affect the arousal in my body, but I also don't need it anymore. Sometimes letting ourselves fulfill the fantasy in our mind gives us closure so that we don't actually feel the craving for it. And it also allows us to do it in a way that we don't have to, impact our husband. I can have a fantasy about another person or about a threesome and not actually have to enact that and hurt his feelings. And I think, obviously there's always going to be nuance to conversations like this, because people are going to have different, values around what fidelity looks like and that kind of thing. But my husband and I are so open about the things that we fantasize about. And there's been a lot of studies about how even just sharing your fantasies creates a level of intimacy that you can't do without sharing your fantasies. So even if it's something that you don't want to, reenact in real life, sharing it with another person actually creates that. It's because you're dropping into that very vulnerable state, giving each other insight into, your erotic psyche. It creates that level of intimacy for a deeper connection, deeper sexual connection and emotional connection. And so for me personally, I've never been someone, well, not never. I think there's definitely a point in my life when I would feel that guilt and I would try to shut those thoughts off if it was something that I sort of, quote unquote, thought that I wasn't supposed to be thinking about. But by leaning in and giving myself, full permission to let my imagination go a bit wild, and then having that experience of opening up to my partner about it, and, him being like, yeah, that's really sexy, let's talk about that more. Or him then, trading a fantasy for a fantasy. It's actually enhanced my sex life. And I find, the conversations that I have with my clients that's often what they find as well, is it gives them permission, which I think when it comes to sex, permission is the biggest piece. If we really want to feel the depth of our pleasure and of that, erotic innocence, it comes when we give ourselves permission to be able to feel everything and to think about everything and to, play out those experiences in our imagination.
I absolutely love that. It's really powerful because it takes a certain level of connection with yourself first, radical honesty, letting go of the shame and guilt. I can relate to that because I felt that guilt feeling of thinking about threesome. I said, oh, it's not, matching the value. Even when I was in a relationship, and it's powerful. And now you really activated me. I actually should really write it out, like really go deep. Hey, maybe it's going to be a nice, beautiful novel for people to dive into. But it's just for myself to see, hey, that I just needed to feel this right now and then let it go. And then this could be the most beautiful manifestation letter to the universe, because if it's meant to be in my life, then it will appear in the exact way that suits my frequency and my standards and values, right? So actually just letting it go. But the more powerful part that you shared is, I really admire you and your husband, is like to be so vulnerable, right? Honesty is the highest form of intimacy. Someone said that, some
I
wise
love
person,
that.
I remember. And I that stuck with me, because firstly, it starts with yourself, because the biggest problem is actually being honest with ourselves. And that's where your work comes in. And also, the writing can be a beautiful, magical tool for that, really powerful to be really honest with yourself. As I said, like, you can burn the pages. It is not about, you don't have to keep it and then talk about it. The main thing is you talk about it, with yourself, and then let it move through you. And it just needs to be heard, needs to be said, and boom, let it go. And that is most of the time the act that is needed. But what you do with your husband, I find it amazing, because you have to really get your ego out of the way, because you are vulnerable, right? You said, oh my gosh, I have this fantasy. I love you, but I have this fantasy. And then being able to do that, firstly, that you both do that and hold space for each other. And then it actually enhances your sex life, your intimacy, and your connection, because you, like you said, maybe you say, oh, you have this fantasy. Let's talk more about this, right? It can come too. But of course, I'm sure, have you experienced like jealousy? Because it's my own insecurities, I would say I can get jealous of those things easier. Also because I got betrayed before in a relationship. I guess. So there's a bit of like, people don't like the word, but there's probably a little bit of old residue in my body cells stored, that just need to be released. And that these parts can only come up with another person. I believe that you can do a lot of work on your own, which I have done and continue to do, but certain parts will be triggered and can only be triggered with the partner then.
Yeah.
These are then the parts that will come up. And so I put this question to you. Did you experience like...
Yeah, I love what you just said. And, it's funny because I feel like that's another thing that I've been talking about a lot with people recently is, so many people think that they are going to, figure everything out by doing the work on their own. Whereas it adds a whole nother layer when you start to do it with someone else, especially when it comes to sex, like there's only so much that you can do by self-exploration. But then when you start to apply it to a relationship, it brings up a whole other realm of things that, like couldn't experience just by yourself. And the jealousy, I think that's a very human thing, like we all get jealous at certain points. I think that for me, because of all the work that I've done on myself within my relationship, and, it's interesting for me as well, because I've been with my husband for so long, pretty much this whole entire sort of like sexual renaissance that I've had has been with him. He's been witnessing it. He's been witnessing me have my experience. He's been having his own experience, and then we're having our experience together. So it's been a really interesting experience to do it with him, both, side by side and, together and interweave the two. But I think because of the work right now, that jealousy is not necessarily something that arises for me. But at the start of the relationship, it definitely was. And I think it's something, if that's something that triggers you, that's fine. It's allowed to trigger you. You don't have to have all your shit together. You don't have to be like, reach like the highest stage of enlightenment in order to do this. But what I do find is that, especially when it comes to being vulnerable and, exploring fantasy and sharing fantasy with a partner or a lover is something that, kind of like excites you or makes you curious, but like you're scared, that's really normal because it is so vulnerable to do. And what I'll say is the first time is the scariest because what happens is the first time you do it. And a lot of the time, as long as you're with the right person, a lot of the time the response that you get is, ooh, I like that. Tell me more, or like, ooh, how can we make this happen? Or, like it's a lot of the time it's like a pretty sexy response and it starts to, first of all, normalize it, like, oh, that thing that I buried deep inside me actually is okay for me to think about and feel and express. But all of a sudden you start to feel that intimacy, that connection with the other person, because you said the hard thing, the scary thing, and you survived it. And not only did you survive it, but all of a sudden it's opened up this other portal into your relationship for something that you can explore together. And it makes you not feel so scared next time, because all of a sudden you know the potential that's there. So I find it does get easier with time.
Wow, thank you. I think it is so powerful. And whoever is listening to that, I believe that is one of the keys to have a very well-functioning, conscious, happy relationship with yourself and with your partner in whatever shape or form. Because I just, when you talked about this, and of course my reflections that I did very intensely over the past 2 years, because I also chose celibacy for consciously, deliberately for, it's now 1.5 years, which is amazing because I obviously needed that and to really cleanse and to be really become conscious. But when you are in, so aware and honest, and you actually allow yourself to come, let this all come through, that whole relationship just takes on another level. And I believe that is the key, and to express that, because I haven't done that in my past relationships. So they were never the right people anyways. In hindsight, of course, we were meant to be together for this journey, and there was lots of learning and growth for both sides. But I realized a big point that, and especially the last relationship, I'm very grateful for it, because it was the opposite. There was not much intimacy happening at all, like in general, which I have never experienced before. But it was meant to be exactly that way. So I could see that I wasn't fully expressing myself to myself first. And then, of course, that response, that was the reflection, because I wasn't doing, he was just a reflection of that. I wasn't doing, I was completely hiding it, feeling ashamed, not giving it space. And then boom, when I, went on my journey, it just all was coming out, and it was always there. Although boxing was a big part for me to express, right? Like playful and life force energy. So that took up a lot of time. Everything was about that. So yeah, it's powerful. I hope that a lot of people take something, away from this, and just don't be like afraid to go there. I know this is scary. I can imagine that the first conversation, I can imagine myself like with my future partner and be like so scared, like, oh my gosh, that he will judge me. I feel guilty. Oh my gosh, like no, or we break up. Right? There's this fear like, oh, he will not love me anymore. Then, even if that may happen, I'm not saying this is happening. Like you said, most of the time it's actually the opposite. But let's play give the mind the other scenario, and let's say if that happens, and was never the right person for you anyway. Like I believe that too. If you have the right person, that you will match that, and this person is ready and prepared to do that with you. And it makes me excited. I think it's amazing what you do and how you embody that. And that comes to the point, I think you said that early in the conversation, with there's a lot of coaches out there, and in general, I feel like now people talk about energy and healing and la la la. So I don't care the paper certification, but I care about embodiment. So if somebody has 10 years of experience, but maybe they haven't done a course in it, but they have embodied it, that is more value for me. But this is my personal experience. Of course, a paper is always good for the mind and the ego, but there's the difference. You can also have people who have the certificate, but they have no clue of anything, because they just
that's true too.
Embodied or any experience, right? And even I see now, and you probably can relate to that, the journey you had to go through in order to be in that position today. You had to have all these experiences. I would have not been able to help people in the space I'm doing it now a couple of years back or 5 years back or whatever. I wouldn't have had the experience to do that, or to have capacity to hold the space for them. Totally admit that. So yeah,
100%.
enjoy the process, the journey, because it gives you everything. Every moment of your life is teaching you something. It's adding something to your toolbox that it's never for nothing. It always is on purpose. Yeah, very powerful and beautiful. I know we could probably talk forever, right?
Yes.
Is there something that you still wanted to share? But also I started to do that now, wanted to do that now in 2026 with my season 2, because the talk, or the podcast, is called DinsTalk, and Dins is my last name. I did years ago. I said it stands for Do It Never Stop. And that means something that, you think or you do, or people it's a good advice to do, something that you want, that's calling from your soul you want to share right now? I know that can change all the time, but is this something that comes through for you?
I love that. I think, to be honest, there's two things, and but they're really powerful. The first is to listen to your body. And, earlier in this conversation, we talked a lot about, the menstrual cycle and living cyclically. And we talked a lot about, gaining knowledge around our bodies. And the knowledge is one thing, but what our bodies are actually asking for is a completely different story, and it overrides the knowledge. So yes, educate yourself, but more than that, forget everything you know and simply tune into your womb. Every day, it will tell you exactly what you need. It will tell you what you need to eat. It will tell you when to rest. It will tell you what kind of exercise you need. It will tell you what kind of sex it is craving. And listening to the body is going to be so important. And the second thing that I really think people need to hear is to use your voice. Use your voice in every context. Speak your truth. Whether it is in work, relationships, friendships, family dynamics, whether it is writing them down or speaking them aloud, let the stories that you hold within you come to the surface, because when we allow ourselves a place, a space to express them, that is what triggers those things falling into place for us. So if you are able to ask for and demand what you desire, what your body craves, what you are no longer willing to settle for, what you ache for, that's when all of a sudden you get to have the things that you have always been wanting.
I love this. Beautiful messages, and thank you so, so much, Liz, for being here. But most importantly, how can people find you and how can they work with you? Because if they listen to that, they're like, I want to feel that. I want to work with Liz. I want to explore more. So where can they find you? What's the best way? And I will put that in the show notes below.
Yeah, definitely. I think probably the best place is my website. My website is just lizgorga.com, and that is going to be always up to date with all of my offerings. So I am located in Brisbane, Australia, but I do work, online. So obviously, if you're wanting in-person body work, I'm in Brisbane, but I do mentorships online that involve virtual guiding of Yoni massage and coaching and that kind of thing, as well as soul-free storytellers is probably the biggest thing that I'm pouring my energy into at the moment. That's a group space, but it is held online. There are amazing, amazing women from all over the world. And if this conversation was really exciting for you and you really love that weaving of the erotic expression with creative expression and the act of storytelling, then that's a space that's going to be continuing. So my website, I'm also on Instagram, which is just at Liz Gorga, and on Substack, which I believe is also Liz Gorga. So easy to find me. I am sharing a lot more of my writing on Substack, both erotic stories as well as my expertise on sex, love, relationships, and all of that in more long form writing, if that is what you're after.
Thank you. Beautiful. I'm sure people will try to find you and connect with you. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in and listening. And if you have any questions of anything you want to know, anything that sparked up or you got even triggered, please connect with any of us. Leave comments below. We're always happy to hear, and I'm always going through the comments personally through each one of them. Thank you so much for supporting this, Liz. Again, thank you for your time. It's powerful, the work you do. Keep doing this. The world needs it. And yeah, guys, until next time. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to DinsTalk. I hope today's conversation sparked something within you. Remember, you have the power to align with your soul, take bold action, and live a life fueled by passion. Don't forget to subscribe, share with others, and leave a comment if this episode resonated with you. And as always, do it, never stop. Until next time, keep claiming your fire and your power.